Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Sonic the Hedgehog film, movie, thing. So, I'm simply doing this because I have found out that supposedly this movie is going to make a sequel, and why not go out of our way to just go on and talk about this movie? The movie that, of course, was to be delayed because they couldn't have really bothered to try to do the CG right for a film, but then after they go and they do a better job at CGI, they could have taken a much more delay to try to put also out a better film. I'm sorry, like, these live action slash CG computer things, whatever, they always have a certain formula. When really looking at, like, Woody the Woodpecker, the live action variation, look at like even something as simple as Howard the Duck. Like Howard the Duck, the original movie, like we have it where like Howard the Duck is to be from another planet, and like this kind of really makes sense to like compare to this film. We have Howard the Duck coming from another planet to go and meet some Earthling being, whatever. We have some kind of learning blocks and some understandings between these two characters, but then eventually, all of a sudden, they're to realize there's to be some other threat that is to come from some other planet somewhere, and then Howard the Duck has to go out of his way to eventually fight this threat. Kind of feels like the same exact thing here. Like, we like also would have like Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Isn't like Who Framed Roger Rabbit like almost very similar to this movie, with the exclusion of a much more like Sonic CGI budget, where you eventually have Tails and Knuckles and whatever the heck else in this film because they couldn't have been bothered. So, because this movie was such a lazy attempt that people called them out on it, and then they tried much better to put something out. But then they just turned around and just still made a film that just was like, like they tried, I guess. Like, it's another movie to be out there. And I don't know, I just don't quite understand its like popularity. Maybe Jim Carrey, yeah, like he does carry this film, and like there might be some jokes here and there, but overall this just kind of feels like it's stealing from a lot of things that came out around that time also. We end up having quite a few times where Sonic is to basically copy and paste, steal straight up from the Quicksilver scenes of X-Men, because like this character has like nothing better to do but to just go like really speedingly fast through most of this film, and there isn't much tie from Sonic's actual world coming into here. We just have to create a threat for Sonic, and we even don't actually give us the legitimate Robotnik that we actually are to really be all well known until very much the ending of this, where we're just disappointed in that also, where it's just like, why did we have like a bare bones second thing of the real Robotnik, and then we're going to be promised to get that in the next film? Whatever. So yeah, just going into this movie, just another stereotypical, like, if you really look at like Alvin and the Chipmunks and a number of like these kinds of films, like they're all the same, and really like we have like the goofiest way to put a story together in every single one of these things, where it's just like, man, like if they could have only spent a lot more time in the Sonic world of things instead of going and telling and showcasing us this kind of story, because we simply weren't going to get that anyways. Because really look at the Sonic games and how they just got lazier over time. And so they just, like, we just have a bunch of people that all just wanted to shove a product out there and be, like, fine with just shoving a product out there to remind people that there's still something out there to, like, hey, go and buy this new Sonic game, go and buy this new thing. And so really that's just what this is. It's just taking a product and putting it in another medium so that way you can turn around and go like, oh, well, like, yeah, I guess there is still Sonic stuff out there. So with that said, let's just go into that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this film. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we can do spoil this movie. So very beginning of this film, we have Sonic, who is in the midst of battle between Robotnik, who is to be in his Robotnik ship. There's going to be some times where I am going to go and tell the technical name of stuff, and then there's also just going to be like, Robot Tank, I don't know, because it didn't feel like I could easily find names for everything. So we'll go into this. So the very beginning of this film is to like show us in the midst of battle, I guess, to get us intrigued, but then it kind of and goes back into the origin of Sonic and how we end up having like absolutely zero. We don't have in Sonic's world. We don't have a Tails, Knuckles, nothing. We just have some weird, goofy owl character called Long Claw. Wow, that's just uber exciting. So we, of course, in the very beginning of this, have Sonic going and running through Green Hill Zone, which is the kind of coveted, like, for people that know Sonic, they'll know, like, of course, the Green Hill Zone where you have the of course, bridges that eventually give out, or the, of course, loop-to-loop kind of thing. Like, it's a very familiar setup here. So we have Sonic that is to go home one day to, of course, this Long Claw character. And all of a sudden, we end up finding out that Sonic is to bring a number of enemies to him. And then Long Claw has to eventually try to fly him out of there and try to protect him. And Long Claw ends up getting shot and taken down and told Sonic, like, hey, like, use your rings to go into another planet or another, like, world. We end up having, of course, chasing after him. Supposedly, I've heard two different things. So I've heard that this is quite possibly the Knuckles clan or Echidnas. Echidnas? Echidnas. Echidnas? Whatever. It looks like the Knuckles clan. It looks like a lot of them are to, like, seemingly have, like, the Knuckles kind of red on them. So we have Sonic who goes from this place to eventually going into another world, which lands him into Green Hills, Montana. So Sonic eventually is to go and make himself his own, like, tree house. He's to go on and find himself reading a bunch of Flash comic books, because of course, why wouldn't he be reading Flash comic books? It makes a lot of sense here. So we go on and, of course, have a moment where Sonic is to go on and seemingly, without people knowing, like, make his way throughout this town and to tell us, like, certain people that he is to call, like, oh, that's Crazy Dan or something like that. Or Crazy Carl. Yeah, Crazy Carl. So we now also have to go and have Sonic go on and like showing all of like the abilities of what he can all do, playing ping pong with himself, going on and seemingly like playing baseball with himself, going on and being every single player in the baseball field, whether it's the outfielder, whether it's the pitcher, whether it's whatever, because Sonic is just so fast that he, of course, can stop time to eventually be anywhere at once. So, Sonic eventually is to realize that he is so alone and that he will be forever alone, that he eventually goes and causes a power outage in this town. So now let's go and focus on Tom. Tom, of course, is the sheriff of this small town of Montana. And so Tom is going on and is to desperately hope that there's going to be some real crime in his town, because he is to have a bucket list to, of course, want to be able to save people. Like, that's what he really wants to do. And the only thing that he is saving is really just him wanting to just save up to move on to somewhere else. I really want to save up and go somewhere else because nothing ever happens here. Like, we kind of have that, like, as the normal cop-like thing. Like, look at movies like Turner and Hooch, where nothing really happens there up until this one crime, and then Tom Hanks's character's like, oh yeah, I should really just stay in this town because, like, man, there's murderers happening. Wow, isn't this exciting? So, we have, of course, Tom, who is having this kind of speed gun, and he ends up going and seeing a turtle that's kind of moving around, and Tom is to go and click the speed on this character, and it's to say 1. And so Tom is like, hey, buddy, like, what's the rush over there? Like, where's the fire of this turtle? So all of a sudden, like, Tom has nothing better to do, and all of a sudden he's to kind of go through his speed gun, and all of a sudden Sonic is running past him, and it says like 297. He's like, whoa, that's fast. And so all of a sudden Sonic runs by him again, and there's to be a speed of 300. And so Tom's like, what the heck is that? Like, what's going on? We, of course, have Sonic weirdly calling Tom the Donut Lord, and that's what he ends up calling him throughout this whole entire movie. And so we have eventually when Tom is to, of course, find out that he is going to make it to San Francisco. We have a girl named Maddie who is to go and bake him a cake, like kind of congratulating him on this accomplishment. And weirdly, she's to also have a cake that, like, oh, like, San Francisco sucks or something like that. And Tom's like, oh, no, I made it. And she's like, oh, wrong cake. So, like, she has a backup cake, I guess, for, like, this girl just has nothing but time, I guess, because this is such a small town. So, Tom is to consistently be dealing with raccoons at his place. And so eventually we get to a point where Tom, during this power outage, is to have to deal with a deputy called Wade, who is to basically be a ignorant character. Honestly, the guy who's to play Wade, who's Adam Pawley, is to always play this ignorant character. Like, good God, like, look at him in, like, Iron Man, like, what is it, like, 2, 3? Yeah, I think it's 3. Where he ends up playing the guy that's the, like, the tattooed, armed guy. Like, he always plays these, like, ignorant people, and, like, that just must be his bread and butter. It's like, hey, man, I'm getting these big, fat, huge, succulent films, and they just keep tossing me around being the ignorant person, and there's nothing better for him to do but being this obliviously ignorant person, and I guess that just works for him. So, being honest, like, this guy needs to eventually do some kind of role that people are gonna, like, not see him as this stupid, ignorant person. So, Wade, of course, is to have this power outage happen, and so Wade is to immediately call Tom, and so Tom is to tell Wade exactly what to do. Like, well, hey, like, how about you tell this person in town to do this, you tell this person in town to do that, you tell this person in town to do this. Like, you would think that this guy would write this down for how, like, horrible of memory or whatever that this guy is to have, or you would think Tom would tell him that, but Tom doesn't really care because he's on his way out. So Wade all of a sudden is going and having the phones going flying off the hook, and he's not dealing with any of them. And so Wade is just going like, oh, like, what was the first thing that this guy told me to do, Tom? Oh, he told me to relax. Oh, okay, I'll just relax, because that's all that Wade could have the memory of remembering. So Tom goes on and is to eventually go and deal with these raccoons. And it seems that Maddie, being a veterinarian in this whole story of things, is to have Tom, coincidentally, with some tranquilizer gun that he's going to go and try to scare some raccoons. But let's put a pin in that. So, since this power outage happening, we all of a sudden have this military force that is to go on and crazily just think, well, hey, like, there is something horribly going wrong with this town, and it must have something to do with some kind of like thing beyond our reasoning. So we have to go and call Mr. Robotnik, of all people, to go and deal with this, which I'm like, this makes no sense. This feels like overkill to have like a military force over something as simple as a power outage, that they're all like, hey, like, we have to figure out what's going on here, and we have to go and send Mr. Robotnik to deal with this, because it seems like he is to have some kind of, like, idea of how to kind of deal with a new threat of sorts. So, Mr. Robotnik goes on and arrives at this town, and he is to immediately talk to Major Bennington, which weirdly, I've been watching a lot of Neil McDonough movies for whatever reason, but, like, always enjoy his work. But we basically have Robotnik kind of basically, like, asking what this major's name is, and then telling him it's like, no one cares. No one cares what your name is. Like, get out of here because no one cares who you are. Go away because... Go off screen because no one cares. And so, really just, like, what was the point of even this character, even if the movie is to basically tell you that this guy is pointless? But we just have Robotnik throughout this entire movie just calling everybody useless, or, like, basically calling them ignorant or whatever. Or we just have Robotnik consistently telling these stories of how that he has just outsmarted people in the past, like how he had gotten punched a whole one time and then eventually gone on to figure out a way to never get punched ever again up until a certain point. So, Robotnik, of course, is to go on and try to have these drones of his, who are actually to be called Badbots, or no, Badniks. Yeah, that's what they're called, Badniks. And so, because I know I have this somewhere. It doesn't matter. I know the name anyways. So, it doesn't really matter in this case. So, Badniks are going through and finding a unusual footprint that like anybody else would have just called it as a normal footprint, but not seemingly Robotnik. He's like, oh no, this is unusual. This is an unusual thing. This is an unusual threat. We have to go and figure out what this is. So we have where Tom is to go on and eventually do some investigating, and while he was to go and like have this speed gun, Tom was to eventually go and find this one strand of hair coming from Sonic, and so Tom had kept this. And when Tom was to eventually have that power outage, all of a sudden the Sonic hair was to glow. So Tom, with this tranquilizer gun, is going in to try and get rid of these raccoons. And so Sonic, who is to all of a sudden realize in this town that he needs to go to another Earth because it seems like there is to be a real threat here, or there seems that he is going to eventually be found out soon. Sonic is to go and decide to get all of his gold rings together to create another portal to possibly a mushroom universe, where he's like, mushroom world, I don't, that's not all that great, but oh well, like, it's the only real thing that I have left to go to next. And so we have, of course, Sonic going and taking one of these rings, and at the time that he's going to go to Mushroom World, all of a sudden James Marsden's character, Tom, comes in and shoots him with his tranquilizer, having Sonic coincidentally be looking at the shirt of Tom that says San Francisco, because it seems that Tom is heading that way fairly soon. And so we have Sonic that is to say San Francisco, and all of a sudden San Francisco is to appear to have the Transamerica Pyramid building be the building that Sonic is to drop all of his rings conveniently onto. So then both Sonic and Tom have to go onto a road trip to get to know one another. And so Tom is to go off and is to accidentally tranquilize Sonic. And so eventually Tom is to put Sonic in this little cage of his little dog cage, because of course he actually has a dog with him. And so when Sonic is to wake up, eventually Sonic is to get out of this cage, but like his legs are very limp. Like he can't go and like be as quick as he usually is. So Tom all of a sudden is to see Robotnik at his door, because it seems that Robotnik is to easily figure out that Sonic is here. So we of course have Tom going and trying to hide Sonic in his home. And then when Robotnik comes in here and is to use his drones to kind of sift through this guy's entire house, we have, of course, where Robotnik is to know that Sonic is here and wants just Tom to kind of admit it, and he, of course, won't. And so we just have kind of like Robotnik's character, who is to be kind of like the better than kind of character, or just the outsmarting kind of character. So eventually what happens is the drones are getting closer and closer to where Sonic is, and so Sonic is trying to become a ball, but eventually he realizes that the jig is up, and so he's going and scrambling throughout this house. And so we of course have Robotnik like Aha, like I knew he was here. And so Tom goes and punches out Robotnik, and then both Tom and Sonic go ahead and try to scramble their way uh, from this place to eventually go on to San Francisco. So eventually, while Tom is going on and making this road trip, and we all of a sudden eventually have certain Robotnik drones following this vehicle. And while that's going on, we slowly but surely have like the car that both Tom and Sonic are to eventually go into. Eventually, it gets wrecked one way or the other. To eventually have like some kind of sunroof being put onto this car and all kinds of horrible things. And so eventually there is to be at one point where Sonic and Tom are kind of scrambling because there is to be one of the drones that end up going on and like can't let go to Sonic no matter what he does. And then so we end up having, of course, Tom, who's trying to take this thing off of Sonic, and he gets it stuck on him also. And so this is like a bomb thing that's going to go off soon. And so eventually Sonic is to figure out some kind of tool to eventually get this bomb off. But then eventually the bomb goes off while Sonic is far too close to it. So all of a sudden now Tom is scrambling to take Sonic to Maddie's house and is trying to hope that Sonic will revive out of this. And so like we have where Tom is trying to disguise Sonic and is just saying that he has an animal here, but eventually they of course see that it's Sonic and they're like, okay, it's like, so we're just going to deal with whatever animal this is. And so eventually when Maddie is to pull Tom aside, it's like, well, hey, like, you do realize that I'm taking this all very easily and I'm not freaking out. And so Tom is like, well, yeah, I do realize that. And she's like, well, great, because I'm freaking out. Like, is he an alien? Like, what is he? So Tom then has to try to, like, explain, like, but barely he does. And so eventually they go and they get some Epsom salts to go and wake Sonic up. And then eventually we realize that Sonic is to have horrible shoes. So then this girl is to, of course, give Sonic his, of course, iconic shoes that he is to wear throughout the rest of this film. So eventually what ends up playing out is we, of course, have the whole time we have Maddie's... like, I want to say it's either, like, it doesn't really look old enough for this woman to really be this girl's mother, but, like, I'm assuming it's probably her sister. So we have Rachel, who is to go on and get tied up here, because we have where Rachel is to go on and tell Maddie, like, hey, you should get a divorce from this guy, he's going to leave you, he's going to go on and do a number of dating apps, and so on and so forth. And now that Rachel is to kind of deal with this whole Sonic thing, she ends up just getting tied to this chair, where eventually we have this one girl who's kind of running around her. And Rachel will say, hey, could you put my Fitbit on so that way I can, like, get some steps today? So, and then Maddie is to realize that eventually, like, her sister is, like, tied up in her house. She completely forgets about her. So Sonic eventually is to go back on with Tom back onto the road to eventually make it to like San Francisco. We have some bumps in the road. We eventually have it where Sonic is to go to this bar called Roadhouse, and so because Tom is to want to go and get food at this Roadhouse bar, is going to bring it back to Sonic, but Sonic is so excited about what he's seeing from the from the outside of this bar that he's so tempted to come back in, or to go into to this bar, but he comes in there with a weird, goofy disguise. So Tom and Sonic are in this bar, and eventually we have Tom coming up with every excuse under the book of Sonic eventually being Sonic the way he looks. And so, like, you would have thought he would just said, oh yeah, this guy's a cosplayer. Like, oh, okay. So, like, oh yeah, my kid is a cosplayer. Like, yeah, like, he's really good, right? Like we're, like, trying to go to a convention to try to get, like, him some kind of gig because he's so good at cosplaying. Yeah, he really is. Yeah, he really is. Yeah. So, like, you would have thought that would have been in the excuse, but we just have where Thomas is just say, like, uh, this guy is have this kind of, like, skin ailment where it turns his skin blue and this and that. Uh, so Tom eventually is to go on and mention a bucket list here, and Sonic is like, well, yeah, I'm only going to be on Earth for one day, and, like, I have to do a lifetime of living in one whole day. And so Sonic starts to go on and is to rattle off a bucket list of things. And so immediately we have Tom, who's desperately trying to uh, like, play to the fact that Sonic needs to, like, put together this bucket list, going on and like, riding a bull, like a robotic bull, or going on and having like, certain kind of foods, or getting drunk, or, like, and they eventually go on and get into a fight. And so Sonic is, of course, to stop time to go on and like, take out all these people and have, of course, like, a bunch of chili dogs. And then once he is to go out or go back to their hotel, their little motel, he ends up farting. And Tom is like, man, really? And he's like, hey, man, like, I had a lot of chili dogs. So it seems that Sonic is to eventually go and do everything on this bucket list but one thing, that is to make a friend. And Tom's like, oh, okay, well, like, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. So, so they get out, and so we have, of course, these characters going and making it to San Francisco. And when they, of course, make it to San Francisco, they eventually are to be met up by Maddie. And with that also happening, we have Robotnik also coming into the fray of things and wanting to go after Sonic. So Tom and Maddie and Sonic are to make their way into the pyramid building. And so we have Tom, who's to mention that somebody is jumping off this building, and a police officer from Montana has to go and deal with this whole situation. And so, with weirdly having Sonic in this bag where he's talking to both Tom and Maddie, we eventually have people like, do you have a baby in there? Like, do you have a kid in that bag? And so Sonic is continuing to talk over and over. And so we have Tom and Maddie who get to this building and get to the very top of it and have Sonic get his rings. And it seems that Sonic is just about to go on and go into this mushroom world, to all of a sudden have Robotnik appear with all his drones in this massive ship, and is now going to fight it out with Robotnik. And here's where we get to the very beginning of this movie within these scenes here. So Tom and Maddie are worried that they of course are going to get pelted with bullets, where like Sonic doesn't have that concern. Kind of like it's kind of funny when like Sonic was trying to break that bottle on the one guy's head, but he was just like click 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 click. Like, why can't this break? Click 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 click. He was like trying to break it, and he like it seemed impossible. So we have, of course, Sonic going and just chucking both Tom and Maddie off of this building, which is like, I'm sorry, like that's a horrible thing for like a kids movie to like, yeah, just toss people off of a building. Sonic will rescue them. It seems like a horrible thing to have a kid like be seen, but it's whatever, right? So Sonic conveniently is to get hurt by Robotnik's uh, ship, because Robotnik's ship can also super speed. Because he is to go on and find the blue hair that Tom was to have. And so Robotnik is to put and place it into his ship. And like, I'm also kind of hugely skipping around on this movie also, because we end up having that one scene where Robotnik is in his little like trailer like thing, and he's going and like having this like running away from like T-Rex moment, and like he's kind of playing around with all these like effects and whatever that are in his little trailer, and all of a sudden his kind of minion guy who is to uh, be Agent Stone is to go and give him like, hey, do you want this like goat milk macchiato whatever like coffee? And Robotnik is like, well, yes, because I like the way you make them. Like, we just have Robotnik that is also like making people uncomfortable, but then he turns around and does some kind of like backhanded compliment, which I think is just kind of like funny here also. So we also had the one scene where Tom was going and calling Wade on the cell and telling Wade what's going on, and all of a sudden Robotnik is to be right there with Wade, and so eventually Robotnik is to pick up the phone and say like, yeah, like I was punched once, but then all of a sudden I went and created something where like I never got punched again. And so I'm going to do the same to you, Tom. So, like, we also go on and have, like, Robotnik, who had created this, like, robot tank and is chasing after both Sonic and Tom. And we eventually have this thing go into having so many drones and so on and so forth. And like, I kind of want to cover all my bases because I feel like I'm quickly going through all of this movie, because like, why not? Because it's kind of like, let's get to the finishing of this, so let's get to it. So we go on and we have Sonic, who is now dealing with a Robotnik ship that can go as quickly as Sonic can. And so now we can have Sonic like pause time. And so both Tom and Maddie are falling, and Sonic is to wake up perfectly in time from him getting hit by Robotnik's ship, to then go and get a ring and place both Tom and Maddie in this barn that conveniently some farmer is to need help delivering some baby. And Tom is like, well, hey, can you just give me a minute? So eventually Sonic is trying to battle Robotnik. Whoa, Jesus. Good God. And scared the bejeebus out of me. So we have Sonic battling Robotnik, And so then we get to like the beginning of this movie, like the battle in progress and whatever. So Sonic is to go on and is to eventually take a ring and make it back to uh, Montana, because we have Sonic in this movie that is trying to convince Tom to go back to Montana to kind of do these little tiny jobs because it's the right thing to do, and that like there's a lot of people that do rely on Tom, and Tom doesn't really realize that. And so Sonic eventually goes on to battle Robotnik, and so what ends up happening during this is that Tom is to try and take down Robotnik, as like also the people in this town are trying to like defend both the Blue Devil. That Crazy Carl is like, hey, now like we've figured out that this thing really does exist, because Crazy Carl is consistently talking about the Blue Devil, and so everybody in town is to go up in the defense of this Sonic and Tom, because it's like to where I think Tom is to now just be like, heck yeah, like I'm gonna go and stay in this town, because when I need these people in this town, they're gonna come and help me. They might be stupid and not know what they're gonna do, but at least they're gonna help me. So Tom goes and tries to battle Robotnik in the ship, and because Sonic is now kind of knocked unconscious, and we almost assume that he's dead. Like he's just kind of very like burnt, and so we're naturally assuming that now Sonic is dead. And so it seems that Robotnik's plan is to dissect Sonic, and so Tom is trying to prevent that. All of a sudden, now that Tom is confirmed that Sonic is his friend, all of a sudden Sonic now comes back to life and is to be severely energized, so much so that that Sonic is now going on and like speeding through this ship and just taking down Robotnik, and then going and having this mushroom ring to put Robotnik into this mushroom world. And so we, of course, have Sonic, who gives Robotnik one big Sonic push. And now Robotnik is in this mushroom world where he is to mention and go on and say uh, after he like kind of cuts his hair with this weird utensil, and is to mention that he'll be home by Christmas, and that now Agent Stone is to legitimately be an actual like stone. And we have, of course, Mr. Robotnik that is going and having this stone going and being chucked to perform reconnaissance. He's like, ha, reconnaissance. So Sonic is going on uh, to eventually realize that maybe Montana really can be his home, and that he should just stay here. And Tom is thinking that also. That he's like, hey man, I'm not gonna go to San Francisco. Like, what do I need to do in San Francisco? Like, I fulfilled my one bucket list thing, which is to save somebody, and that's what I did. And so Tom is to go on with Sonic to eventually have Sonic have his own little room in this attic. And so we then go on, and because like Sonic is getting like prepared for like bed, because it's roughly his bedtime weirdly. And so we also had the one moment where Sonic is going on and watching both Tom and Maddie go and watch the movie Speed. And I'm like, well, of course you end up having like these two characters watching Speed because of course because it's a Sonic fast Speed. So yeah, I just hope that I'm going to get everything covered here because like there's a lot of Easter egg like stuff in this movie where I feel there might be somebody that points out it's like, oh yeah, you forgot about this one moment and whatever, because like I don't feel a lot of this movie is all that important. But like it also feels like I should at least mention things and like talk about certain stuff. Like I know there's some people that know this movie's dialogue a lot better than I do and whatever, but like I just feel like this movie is just kind of a middle of the road kind of thing where it's just kind of like they tried, but they could have put forth a better Sonic film and they could have actually put together a actual Sonic movie, which I think a lot of people were kind of getting at in the beginning of the film, but then they just turn around and make the stereotypical live action CGI like film, and that's all that really comes out of this. So, with that said, I think and I hope that I've covered at least most of this. Like I kind of took it apart and just kind of went and like did certain random events that went on in here. But I think with that said, I think I didn't cover this in hugely detail just because it's Sonic the Hedgehog. Like people maybe either oddly vastly interested in this film or no one would possibly care because it's Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't know. We'll eventually go into this. If there is ever to be a sequel that seems to be like a much more better attempt at a Sonic film. So, with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Uh, like I feel like there is a lot that I left on the drawing room floor of this one. Just like we'll call it a day. I think I'm like satisfied enough about what all I said here. Even though some people may be left unsatisfied, like he did nothing, nothing. Um, because I just like kind of randomly like put like talked about a bunch of scenes, and then I just kind of like randomly just said like every little bit and piece and whatever throughout the thing, just because really, really that's how like I want to get like the real big events, and then eventually I'll go back and reflect on like the smaller things and the whatever little details. We also had the one ending of this film where we had the government official that is to purposely go on and is to deliver both Maddie and Tom a Olive Garden gift card that of course is to be $50. They're like, here you go. And like, man, like I just love that endless freaking pasta bowl. Or oh my god, I just love like going to Olive Garden because you know what? They're family. And I'm like, what a cheesy, crappy like man, do they really have to just need to have sponsors to like supposedly improve this film? And I'm like, God, like they didn't put much effort in this film, and then we turn around and we have them like desperately needing to use sponsorship for this film also. And I'm just like, God, what a cringy way to try to like dip into sponsorship in this movie. Um like that's the kind of disgusting thing about this film is just like them having to like go and like, oh yeah, I guess we can't just have Sonic go through and like be at an Olive Garden. No, like we have to do some crappy gift card thing at the end of this. Like awarding these two for all the hard work that they have done to save Sonic and save the world and save it from Mr. Robotnik. Yeah. So with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.